Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
Bob Scarborough.
Steve Hayes.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys.
FAIRtax
And
Guys.
as they say in the broadcast business, we interrupt this program to bring you a special bulletin. We have been going through the White FAIRtax book by Bortz and Linder, and we will continue to do that here on FAIRtax Power Radio. But the Supreme Court just handed down a decision in a rather important and could be a far-reaching case regarding what taxation in this country might want to look like. So we have invited our AFFT president, Steve Hayes, and who is also a tax attorney, to be with us and explain what has gone on. And so, Steve, we certainly appreciate you being on the program. It's always a pleasure to have you. So reach for your tax attorney's hat here.
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm just saying.
You go, please.
No, you go.
I have talked to you about this, and I've written an article on it, and read a lot of articles on it. And the Moore case was a case where, in 2017, in the Reform Act, the Congress did something, and I think probably inadvertently, honestly, in terms of the Republicans, but they still did it, where they provided that when you had a corporation that was not onshore, this was in India, that was controlled by US citizens, which it was, that particular corporation, all of the retained earnings, meaning the earnings that they had earned over the years, were to be calculated for each owner, and that percentage of income was to be attributed to the owner.
Okay, well, that's what I was going to do. I was going to ask you to set this up, and you jumped right in there. Keep going.
Okay, and so what happened was these people, the Moores, invested a small amount of money. I think it was like $15,000. A number of years ago. I think it's 15 years or more. And this company was for the purpose of building farm implements, and at a very low cost, so they could be used by lower income Indians. It was more of a social program, even though it was still a for-profit company. And it made money every year, but they kept it, they retained it, probably planning to use it, from what I've read, to help, further what they were doing, but they still had earnings that they had. Now, previously, and since 62, actually, what's happened is that if a US person, let's say Bob Scarborough, invested in one of those companies, and what it was doing was earning rent income, fee income like that, they could reach out to it if you own more than 50% of it and make you report it on your tax return. So Bob sets the company up in Panama, and he gets these earnings that are not from business operations, but from investing and products that yield, passive income, savings accounts, royalty income, things like that. They said, okay, Bob, you can't do that and keep it there where it can grow tax-free. You've got to report that every year in your income, just like you earned it here. The difference with this case is they said the earnings of the company, even though you were like a 13% shareholder, I'm picking on Bob Scarborough here, you still have to report all of the income that's been accumulated, and you have to pay tax on it one time. Okay. The Moores sued and said that's obviously not right. And the implications were that if Congress was allowed to do this, then the income doesn't have to be received. They could impute or otherwise say, look, even though you didn't receive it, even though you did not have a right to receive it, you still have to report it as income. And that's what the basis of the wealth tax. And if you take it to its extreme, it would allow them to come and say, okay, we all own houses. We've probably owned them for a number of years. Now, we have not received any income from the house because we're living in it, but it's gone up in value.
Quite a
so
bit.
what we're going to do is we're going to do a one-time tax and tax you on the difference between what you paid and what it's worth today.
Well,
That's just one time.
that would wipe me out. I've been in my house. I've been in my house for over 40 years. It has accumulated quite a good bit of appreciated value. And
that's
okay. Well, let's get going here.
Here's what happened with the decision.
Okay, I was going to get. What is the decision? What did they say? What did the Supreme Court say?
What they said was that Congress can do it.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. They didn't say Kavanaugh, who's supposedly a conservative justice, tried to limit the effect to the facts in front of him, meaning he did not say the tax I just described was constitutional. He did not say that the wealth tax itself was constitutional. He tried to accept that out. But as the dissent pointed out, you had two levels of dissent. You had the Amy Coney Barrett, along with Alito, who were saying we would have been against it, except they didn't plead the case right. Kind of a BS answer, but warning that it was providing fodder to a lot of people to think that they could do whatever they wanted with the tax code. And then you had Thomas and Gorsuch, and Thomas wrote a very well, in my opinion, well-reasoned opinion, stating that it really was never contemplated by the people that passed the 16th Amendment that it was going to tax income until it was received. See, Barrett, in her dissent, said, well, you should have said subpart F was not legal, which is the one where you can get passive income. And she implied that she and Gorsuch would have agreed with that. I mean, Alito would have signed on. So it would have been 5-4 instead of 7-2. Kavanaugh did something which I've seen some people do when they're trying to get around an issue. He said, well, if you had applied it this way, I might have had a different opinion. A lot of times, if they want to rule against it, they'll say, here it is anyway. And the dissent will say, well, they never pled that, so why, whatever. They didn't do that. So right now, you've got people like Elizabeth, Warren, Biden, and other liberals in support of a wealth tax and in support of being able to do anything they want, doing victory dances. Now, I think they're out of place because I don't believe the majority would have supported it had it been a wealth tax, based on what opinions were. So but it still opens the door. And instead of what we were all hoping, which was going to say, it's only when you receive it. Okay, it's not if you don't receive it or control the right to receive it. For example, if Bob Paxton has a company and he makes money in that company and he chooses not to distribute it, but he could, then there's probably a point where it's fair to say, Bob, it's your income. Okay? Yeah. But what they're saying is it doesn't matter whether Bob received it or not. If it's earned, it's taxable. Now, this was another thing that limited this. This was a one-time, issue. And Kavanaugh made it very clear. It applied for this one thing, but it still opens the door to that. Now, had they done what would have been, I think, more constitutional, which is said it's only when received, ironically, for those of us supporting the fair tax, it wouldn't have been as good. And I'll tell you why.
Please do.
as Lincoln used to say, if you want to get rid of a bad law, enforce it strictly. Okay? You're going to have, well, depends on who wins the election, but if the Democrats control both houses and the presidency, you're going to have them coming out with all sorts of ways to tax, and initially at a higher level of income, but to reach into the pockets of people who have stock options. Well, you could have exercised that and you would have received income, so you need to pay whatever the value of that option is. That needs to be in part of your income. Okay? I'm giving you an example.
Mm-hmm.
And it may sound absurd, but it really isn't if you follow their logic, because you did have the entitlement to, just like you could have sold your house. And you didn't. Well, that's not the government's fault. You know, if you'd sold your house, you'd have had to pay capital gain tax. And you chose not to, Bob Paxton. So therefore, we can tax that gain. I mean, that's the logic that, and it's already coming out. I've read 2 articles by people, as I say, doing a victory dance about it, talking about how many more sources of income they can reach to make things more fair.
Oh, that's always the key word.
That's right. And so that's where they're going. Now, the reason I say from a fair tax point of view, I believe that this is going to scare even more people, because a lot of people and their financial advisor are already telling them, I don't know what's going to happen, but if the Democrats control it, there's a real good chance you're going to come after, you know, your stock options, your other assets that you have. And, you know, I'm not sure how we plan for that, because other than selling it and taking the gain. And that's why people like Bob Dylan and others selling their libraries, Bruce Springfield, their music publishing library, they sold it for 500 million, 400 million. Why? Because the Biden group wants to make capital gains go away. They want to make it ordinary income. It would have cost Dylan another $80 million in taxes if Biden's group had taken over in January and passed that bill. So we're getting a lot more people who are beginning to see the system can be out of control. And that's why it's really interesting to me. You look at all the airplay and all the attention Trump's idea of, you know, A, not taxing tips, and B, paying for the U.S. costs through tariffs, just like we used to. Okay. And even though I think that particular idea is probably economically pretty absurd at this point in time, the key part is get rid of the income tax.
Do you think
There's
that
only a few ways to get rid of the income tax?
do you think that President Trump is throwing out these floating these ideas out there, 2 of which we just talked about? No tax on tips. That could create an entirely new industry in radio business or any other business where you are now being paid based on your merit at the will of whoever you're servicing, whether it be a restaurant, a patron or a listener to the radio station. Or it could be, you know, the any number of things within the tip category. But then the tariff side of it, obviously that was a concept from long ago, from many generations ago. Is he dancing around a tax on consumption without saying he's looking at a tax on consumption?
I think he is. I think he is. I think he's talking about, again, when you talk about getting rid of the income tax, what's left?
Well, we just spent several episodes of our program, you know, reviewing the book by Bortz and Linder, and just within the last couple of recorded episodes, probably 1 or 2 of which we haven't even revealed yet, but the people that can read this book and understand what is actually taking place in the machinery of taxation, whether it's consumption or income, can begin to understand the value of a tax on consumption versus anything else that happens out there. And a lot of the light that's shining on this now is because of Moore versus U.S. And what we're hearing and what we're seeing, because within the last 12 hours or so, there are articles in magazines that are going, that are opining about what just took place at the Supreme Court. And so there's more focus on changing our system so we don't get taxed on things that we have, but we don't have.
Right. No, I think that's very apt comment, because you have where it's in the face of a lot more people. I think that's really what you were saying, Bob, is that more people are looking. Now, a lot of the deep state guys and the establishment guys, have talked about how ludicrous Trump is for what he's proposing, with tariffs, but it's strange. Most of the negative comments I've read stay away from defending the income tax. And I think that's very telling, because almost none, like when I testified before Congress, nobody said when they were attacking me, "Oh, we had such a great system." Okay. Nobody wanted to defend the income tax. And here you've got people deriding Trump for his idea of funding the government, not for eliminating the income tax. And I find that very interesting, because it's something that the more attention he puts on it, the more they have to start countering it with defending the present income tax. And that is a tough hill to climb, as we know.
It is.
Do you think that that in Congress, and Dr. Linder alluded to this reality many episodes ago, but folks, if you want to dig back and look for any of our episodes that have Congressman John Linder in it, he made a comment that a tax on consumption, and for us it's the FAIRtax HR 25, is the only way out of the mess, the financial mess, the fiscal issues that befall us through what's taken place over the life of the income tax, quite frankly.
Yep. No, John is very articulate about it. He knows it. And one of the problems you have with an income tax is that every day you're seeing more people. Some are surprising me because they're traditionally considered more liberal people, really getting worried about the deficit and how it's going to affect not only us on the call right now, but all the future generations coming along, because it's going to be driving out more private capital, absorbing it into the deficit, financing the deficit. And the only way that they really have of collecting the money that they need is to either A, grow the economy a lot faster, which is not going to with the income tax. It's already a very anemic, little over 1% projected. And the other option is to raise taxes. Well, when they raise taxes, particularly the amount they would have to raise them, which would be about 25%, okay, they are going to see a lot less collections. Why? Because evasion is going to continue to go up. It's, if you got rid of evasion today, you would be very close to balancing the budget, even by the IRS statement. So they're in a bit of a quandary. If we try to raise the income tax too much, we're going to collect less money than we need, except from people who are, a lot of them, their constituents who are on payroll.
Yeah. So
The
somebody,
government workers, all those people that are getting their checks, they're going to pay it.
yeah, they need to
But
show these people the Laffer curve.
yeah. Well, see, Bob, what I have found from dealing with most of them, not all of them, but most of them, is that Excel is the king. And what I mean by that is they do these models and they say, well, if you raise the rate 10%, you're going to collect this much more. And you say, well, why is that? Because this is what our model shows. And you say, well, don't you think people are going to look at this, and if they can reduce their taxes, well, that's unpatriotic. I mean, that's not really going to happen. They're going to have to blah, 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 because people make different choices. So not only do they evade, but they delay that. And that's where the Moore case, I'm tying it back to the Moore case, comes into play. I think that's why you're going to see some of these people, these very smart people that are much smarter than we are going to run a program and say, well, we can make these greedy people like Hayes and Paxton and Scarborough exercise their stock options. We can make them sell some of that stock they've held for 30 years. We can make Paxton sell that home he's been in for 40 years. Because if he doesn't, we're going to tax it anyway.
All right. Well, let me see. Let me see if I've got this right in my head. If my perception of this all is that the Supreme Court in this particular case kind of went out of their way to try to make it say the only thing we're withholding here is this one particular tax that applies to Americans who own an interest in foreign corporations. And they were trying to say, no, we're not for Miss Warren's wealth tax and all that kind of stuff. But since they've tried to make this a very narrow ruling applying just to this one case. But as you mentioned earlier, now that they have set the precedent that some unrealized income can be taxed, it's just a matter of time before the Congress critters start trying, oh, well, if we can get this one, let's go after this one, then we'll go after this one, and then we'll go after this one. Now, each of those little cases may end up being litigated, separately as well. But does this set a dangerous precedent that may...
I think hugely dangerous. And remember, this took 6 years to get to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And so basically they come up with something like you just said, like, well, it only applies to people like Scarborough, only to people who have radio stations. That's the only thing we're doing. And by the time it gets decided by the courts, it could be 5, 6, 7 years from now. Now, if Bob wins, he gets a refund, but he's out the money for 7 years, 5 years.
Lost opportunity in the midst of all of that.
And also, depending on how the tax is calculated, you might be forced to sell your station.
Well, and that could happen with anything that we might end up, anybody that gets in those crosshairs, whether it's Mr. Paxton with his house or me with the radio station or anyone else.
Myself with my legal business, they could say, well, you should have made more money this year.
Yeah, and forced to sell the very assets that are valuable, that have value to you in terms of your net worth, and you end up, the whole economic structure starts coming apart across the spectrum, not just in your one category. Because now my lost radio station and Bob P's lost house and your lost legal practice, the services that we provided. Bob living in the rail yard now instead of in his house, and me, I'm just sitting there on my porch yelling at people, instead of on the radio. There's no economic benefit there for sure, but the surrounding mechanism of the economy in a community or wherever ends up being impacted by those decisions, even if it's narrowly focused.
I no, it's the opening, the camel in the tent, the nose, because that's and that's why I say for the fair tax, it's probably good because a lot of people who have been reluctant, particularly on the right, because this has not been universally supported by many of the members of Congress who are Republicans. A lot of them run away from it. And there are more of them that are going to start paying attention because of this. And the reason why is that when they go to their town hall meetings and when they're local people, you're going to have a lot of people saying, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to wake up people. I don't know if they're going to stay awake because a lot of it's going to go like, if we were talking about this a week from now, probably everyone will be talking about the Biden and Trump debate.
True.
And
The
so
news cycle is so tight anymore.
Yes.
It was a decade ago, even in terms of, you're down to an hour, maybe two or a half a day in social media and the 6 o'clock news. You've got 24-hour news channels that, can suppress or expand coverage on pretty much any topic they want to. And hell, excuse my French on the family show here, but they're already talking about the debate now. When we're
of course. And if one of them brings up, I think Biden's going to go after him on the tips and the tariffs. And that's going to renew the issue again. He may or may not go after them on the Moore case. Biden came out with this is wonderful for America. It's going to let us be more fair, blah, blah, blah. That was, he press release from the office. He didn't do it, but somebody in his office did. And you've got that type of thing. And Trump, as far as I've read so far, has not commented on it. But because it was Trump's bill that caused it. So he's going to have a little tricky thing to walk around. Right. Even though I don't think any of them really understood the implications of what they were doing. I really don't. I think the Democrats pushed that through late at night.
Yeah, have to pass it and then find out what's in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they pushed it through and nobody really paid attention to it. And it's only one time, blah, blah, blah. We got subpart F already. It's not really a big deal. Well, it is a big deal. And fortunately, Kavanaugh did try to limit it, but you're familiar with of dicta, right? DICTA. That means things that are stated in a ruling that really aren't on the point. A lot of what he said would not be binding. It's not precedential. It's just a dicta. It's a statement. The only thing that's binding is the decision.
That says this one particular type of unrealized tax is okay, and of course the government says, all right, if I can get this type, I'll go after this type. They'll go after this type. They'll go after this type, and then when they're coming after everything that we own, whether we've actually realized it or not, we the people are going to say that's enough. Get rid of the income tax. We want the fair tax. So hopefully we can get something good out of this.
I think it will. I really think it does because it shows the true insanity of the income tax system. If you go to people, I don't care if they're my grandkids or people that are older, and say to them, you don't have to get the money in order to have to pay tax on it. You got an allowance coming next month. If your dad doesn't pay it, you still got to pay tax on it because it was supposed to be paid.
The whole economy just falls apart around. It's like it becomes a domino effect. There's no way out of it. The entire economy just becomes unraveled because of one particular business category may fit into this ruling or one economic activity, but everything is associated. Bob's house. My radio station, your law practice, folks that are out there, driving trucks. The whole economy it rolls along, finely tuned, but that's the way the free market is. Everybody works to provide a benefit to the next guy. and we all work for the benefit of our communities and our profit motives too.
No, there's no question. And the whole point is that you have a very different, I guess, attitude when you're having people have to look over their shoulder all the time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's what's really happening now. It's like if I go out and, you know, taking my example of the stock options, taking something like that, or stock. I own stock in a company that I've held for a long time. And suddenly, because my income is over the threshold of whatever they're saying it's going to be, I am subject to a one-time tax, okay, on my appreciation.
Yeah. So what are you going to sell to pay the tax? And how does
That's
that?
Exactly right. And
How do they make it one time? How do they make it one time when you continue to own it, and then 5 years later they say, "Well, we're going to make you pay another one time"?
Well, that's exactly the way it would work, Bob. The idea is sort of like, you know, Mark Twain talked about how do you boil a frog? You put him in the water, you turn up the heat gradually.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what they will try to do. They're not total idiots up there. They know that if they came and they told you that every year you were going to pay a tax on the appreciation of your house, that you're going to say, yeah, you know.
No, I'm voting for your opponent in the next election. Yeah.
Yeah, or worse. You know, a bunch of us are going to go stand in front of and block the access to the, you know, the Treasury building or whatever, because we're not going to have the ability to put up with it, not just the interest in putting up with it.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the issue, I think, that they've all got to place. They do not want to inflame people to that extent, so they'll do it much more gradually. And I don't think they'll get to our houses for a few years.
I hope not. But anyway, Steve, we got to thank you for your appearance here. We have run over time a bit. Bob, you're going to have to edit this for the radio a little bit. Our video stream can go ahead and run this full length. But Steve, we certainly appreciate your willingness to talk to us here and your expertise in figuring this out. As we see more fallout from this case, we'll have you back on to discuss that. But again, the Supreme Court has said this one particular type of unrealized gain is taxable. So the door is now open for other types of unrealized gain to be taxed. And when they start getting that much, we'll just throw it all out and get the fair tax. So again, thanks for being with us. And hopefully we'll have you back soon. I know you've got another call you've got to go take care of. So we'll go ahead and let you go here. But again, we thank you for being with us, and we thank you for being with us who are watching and sharing and streaming these videos. We do ask that you do share these videos. That helps a lot. And we will be back right here on FAIRtax Power Radio next week, same time, same channel. Till we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Scarborough.
And I'm Steve Hayes as a guest.
Oh, yes. The FAIRtax Guys reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it together, guys,
you'll demand it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, how much will I bring home?
Go ahead.
How much do you make? We'll just say 40,000, okay? Keep it simple, throw out the deductions, all that stuff. So, you got your 40K, right? Now the first 8,000 is going to be taxed at 10%. The 8 to 33,000 is going to be taxed at 15%. And the 33 to 40, of course, is 25%. So that brings your total to $6,345.
Okay, so the average is what?
16%. Okay, and on top of that, you got Medicare, which is 1.5%, and then of course your Social Security, which is 6.2%. So actually, your new total is $9,405.
Which is
23.65%. You're getting it. You're getting it. Don't even get me started on what the boss has to pay. He's got to pay a portion of your taxes as well, so you don't have to.
Right.